Hi, welcome to another episode of the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm here with Russell Unrath, the CEO of MedCognition. Russell, thanks so much for being here.
No, I appreciate it, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about some really cool AR technology that's being used and continually developed and innovative here in San Antonio. And we're also going to talk to one of the few CEOs that's a non-founder but doing big things in here, which is exciting because most of the people here we talk to are founder CEOs.
Sure, yeah, we're trying.
But before we get into the AR stuff and everything, let's talk a little bit about you, Russell. Get to know you here. You're a leader here in our community. How did you get to MedCognition?
Yeah, sure. So the journey is interesting. So I'll kind of start, in media res, where there was an ad open on LinkedIn for a chief operating officer. I've been looking for a change. I was in the software industry 16, 17 years, doing the same thing, systems middleware. So the plumbing of software, every bank, every major corporation needed it. They all bought it. It was very good. But at some point, you kind of get bored and you want a new challenge. So that being said, if I scale back a little more, right? So athlete in college, only played for a year, had a couple injuries.
What sport?
Baseball.
Oh, okay.
Just catcher, center field, and first base. So I had a lot of fun. Go Red Hawks. Good old Montclair State. But it was D3 school, so no athletic scholarships. Fortunately, I did good enough in high school to get a little bit of help. But in the playing of baseball in 1 year and not really paying attention to the grades, that little bit of scholarship went away in year two, and I wasn't playing the game. So I went through this very awkward period, sophomore, junior, senior year, where I was, kind of fighting a lot of things, right? Losing a game I love and all that. And so I was working a full-time job, in school full-time. I had multiple part-time jobs because I had this wacky idea that I just don't want to have any debt when I graduate college. And again, state school wasn't a lot of money. We didn't have much. So it was every spare dollar either went to gas, insurance for the car, tuition, or books at that time. But was able to do that, in the 4-year allotted time and leave school, with $0 in the bank, but $0 in debt, which is pretty exciting.
I was going to say that's pretty exciting because most people live with $0 in the bank and a big old, pound of school debt that they're trying to carry.
Yeah, so it was like a hand-to-mouth time for sure. Renting a studio apartment in the whole 9 yards with a couple friends. So it was fun. Like we would rotate who slept in a bed, who slept on a couch. But it builds character, right? It's one of those
I slept
things.
on an air mattress for the longest time. I've been there.
Yeah, for sure. So from there, I'd had an internship with a large pharmaceutical company called Genzyme Genetics, which actually, if I take you back a little further, when I started, I was working basically in the mailroom. So shipping boxes, doing things that was uncomfortable, not fun, heavy lifting, but paid well.
Yeah.
And it was close to school. So Empath, which was out of MSKCC, was then purchased by Genzyme for one of their many cancer therapy drugs that they were working on at the time. I knew nothing about that. I got a paycheck every 2 weeks. I would go to school. I could do my homework while I was shipping boxes and things like that.
Right.
But from there, I got into sales. So I met two folks, one named Keith, who's actually with a company called Natera now, and another guy named Alvin. And they're like, I think, you might do okay in this realm. Why don't you give inside sales a try? I really thought much about it. I was really bad at pharmaceutical sales and device sales. So that led to 6 years of operations instead of sales at Genzyme.
But sales is tough.
You have to have a high tolerance for people just not liking when you call them or email them or try to interrupt them in line for coffee, because you get taught early on, right? Like you're always selling, you've always got to be on.
There's always an opportunity.
Yeah, so then I'd be, I was like that young, too green behind the ears, right? Too wet to never try to stop. So I'd overhear something that seemed like an opportunity, and I would just interrupt like a husband and wife at a concert. And then, you get this dirty look. Like, come on, man, we're out on a date. Like I was the one who'd get up from my dinner table, wherever we were, whatever chain restaurant.
Now, were you commissioned?
Yeah.
Oh, well, heck yeah. Then you're definitely going to
So, I had to hustle. Like there was like a...
was it pure commission?
There was a little draw, but then they took it away at the end of the year.
Oh, so it was pure. They just gave you a little bit to float you for a little bit, but it was like
rent and ramen, It was a good time. So that, for whatever reason, even though I did terrible at it, it just fueled this fire to sell.
It teaches you a lot.
Yeah, the failure is what taught me a lot.
You get into the Zig Ziglars,
the Sandler rules,
yes, getting past no. You really start to learn about yourself when you start getting rejected all the time.
Yeah. And I thought it happened a lot in high school with the girls, but it just got worse after that.
We had a similar high school experience. How about that?
It was rough. So from that path of basically failure in sales, I moved into operations.
Okay.
Which was something I was good at. It was easy relatively at the time, especially in the role I was in.
It's easier emotionally.
Well, yeah, because no one you're sitting, you're balancing spreadsheets, you're looking at vendor relationships.
That's right.
Right. And
generally everybody's moving towards the same place versus you're trying to convince somebody that's going to say no to say yes.
Right. Yeah. And ops, we all want to save money from this pot and put it to that pot. All right. Mission accomplished. I can do that. In sales, it was always right. What's the old expression? Like pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
Except in my case, it just kept rolling over me, and I'd run back for it. Like, all right, I'm going to shove this thing a few inches now.
Right.
So anyway. So from the operations role, I move into now direct sales, but in finance. I just made a complete pivot.
Okay.
And frankly, I had family who was working for a core processing company, one of my first cousins, and he's like, you should just come work with us. Big company called FSI. And I said, yeah, let's give it a go. And just fell in love with that. Was good at the core processing side. At the time, the organization had a cutting edge product, which was a board portal, an application, right, for the iPad 1.
Okay.
So big, huge deal. So it was called Director Access, which was for boards of directors at banks.
Yeah.
So instead of printing that thick bundle of paper, it was just...
No, I mean, as a corporate attorney for when I was at Methodist, we had a director something that I had to institute. I mean, it was great. But try getting 70-year-old
10 of them in the same room
to be able to get their iPad out and not look for the paper binder that they
see. That was the big challenge. But what helped with that one, not that company's even in business anymore, was the fact that they looked at the savings like literally per sheet of paper, and they jumped all over it.
The amount of time it saved the assistants to prepare those board books.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Massive.
Yeah, the assistants loved it because
they didn't like me at first because the technology they didn't like, but afterwards when they had more time,
I believe it.
They never said thank you, but I know.
You feel it. You feel it right in the middle of your chest.
That was one of my young attorney, jobs was to get it to be more efficient. So there we go. We got a similarity. It was a good product, whatever it was. I'm sure.
It worked. Listen, it did. Low threshold to buy. I mean, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, so long story short, from there I moved into software. So I was only there about 2 years, right? And now the average cycle in core processing at the time was about 2 years. So you figure it out, right?
There you go.
It was Director Access was good, but it wasn't getting me where I wanted to be. So from there, I jumped into a small startup at the time that was doing a partnership with IBM, all for systems middleware, right? What we were talking about a little earlier. Mm-hmm. And that, whether it was the right time, the right contacts, just the right mindset, life just kind of took off after that in a really good way, a really positive way. Truly fell in love with sales because money was coming in, like good money, the first real money I'd made my whole life. The kind of, it's like, I'm gonna buy a house and I'm gonna settle down somewhere. Yeah. Now, granted, alone, because why not? You just need space. Traveling all the time, so now I've got a house I'm never in. I'm always on the road, and did that for 3 different organizations. Really, actually, technically, it was one because it was purchased several times in a row, and just he got tired of it.
Yeah.
So scaling all the way back, I started looking for opportunities for anything different, and there's this little thing in the back of my head since I was young. Sad story. Mother passes away when I'm 13, which is true. Series of complications with her health. But the whole reason is she's in surgery, and now there's a series of complications in surgery, and unfortunately she passes away. So there was this moment from like 13 and a half where I'm like, I really want to do something medical. Mm-hmm. But my mind was never geared to keep going to school or go to med school or like you go to law school. I wanted to finish and get on with my life, which, there's goods and bads for that. But I wanted to get connected to a company like MedCognition, but I didn't know they exist, didn't know how to get in. So I see this post, Chief Operating Officer, MedCognition, and here's kind of the rules and requirements in their size at the time. So I reached out, sent a nice message to the founder. Crickets for like 2 weeks. I'm like, well, just going to keep looking for jobs. And then my phone rings on Saturday morning, like 6:30 Eastern. I'm like, hello? It's a 210 area code. He's like, Russell, it's Kevin King. How you doing? I'm like, I'm sorry, who? Like, I'm waking up. He's like, oh no, I'm the CEO and founder of MedCognition. I really want to chat with you. When do you have time for an interview? Well, we're on the phone now. So kind of make some coffee. We talk for a little bit. We set up a further one. 2 weeks later, I'm in Texas with the board of directors doing an interview, and a month later, I'm down here starting December of 2020. So it's an interesting way to get there, but it led me to something I actually really care about. Not that I mean, old bosses might hear this, right? I cared about my old jobs, but not like
But
this.
it had a time and place, right?
It did, absolutely.
It had a time and place. And the reason, and thank you for sharing it, is the sales background, which, we talked a couple of weeks ago when we met. is something that makes people very, very, very uncomfortable. But sales from any organization is necessary.
Absolutely.
We're always selling. We're selling something.
Right.
At least ourselves, legally.
Good
So
disclaimer.
knowing the background you have, on those, it puts you into a very different, experience set than what most founders have, which are usually technical, sometimes operational.
Yeah.
And rarely sales, and rarely in some sort of true executive role that they've now gone back into a startup. It does occur, but it's not it's the exception versus the rule for those things. Let's step back and go back to MedCognition.
Sure.
We can bring it all together.
You got it.
So tell us about MedCognition, its founding, and kind of its journey to where it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good story. So 2014, 2015, Kevin King, primary founders in combat in Iraq, brigade surgeon. I can never get that one out right. I slurred it at the Health Cell speech too as well.
I will tell you there will be about at least 4 or 5. See, just did it. Words I will not pronounce correctly.
So now he's training guys, in theater, in combat, and they're using, what he described as large hunks of useless plastic, right?
Sure.
So hard to transport, hard to get around, not really working well in the heat, didn't work well in the field at places like Bullis and other institutions here in San Antonio. So he gets back and he's like, there's something in him. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a more portable way, a more immersive way, a more clinically intuitive way to train. So through happenstance, grace of God, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, he connects with this guy named John Quarles, who's a computer science professor at UT. He's not a computer science professor. You're going to have to cut that one away.
That's all right.
Anyway, so John's a professor at UT, who also at the time was doing his thesis on VR and AR. Just good timing, good luck. So he finds him essentially in a directory. They get connected and start talking about, these different options. And John says, well, I'm doing a paper about the Microsoft HoloLens and the way we can project images into reality. And I think there's something there. And about a year later, after, a lot of conversations, a lot of coding, there was the first ever holographic patient. Now, kind of rough, obviously.
Sure. And what year was this?
2016.
2016.
So the official founding, our incorporation date is August 11th of 2016. So we just turned 6. We're big boys now and girls. But it was all kind of in the 2 years before that is when they really put in kind of the meat of the legwork to get a hologram projected in augmented reality without internet, using a closed loop network. Now in that time frame, they connected with 2 other individuals. Roland Paquette, who was a combat vet from Afghanistan, is also a physician's assistant, and a gentleman named Hector Caraballo, who is an ER doc here in San Antonio as well. He's got a number of other companies that he runs. So these guys came together to validate it clinically for the work that John had done. Had some decent success with sales, some good luck with government grants because John is very talented in writing that. But they hit they hit a wall where they couldn't gear sales anymore. They were cycling through some consultants and different people. And that's what led them to, kind of put out the role for the opportunity I'm in now. But ultimately the mission, which I think is important to share, is to help others train to save more lives. It's nothing more complicated. For them, it was better training, immersive training. For me, it's, and it may sound juvenile, Matt, but it's a mother and a son who get more time because someone was trained the right way to do the right thing, to make the right decision, and now it's going to prolong somebody's life.
Sure. And training, we talked about sports and being from healthcare as well. People don't realize that there's a lot of training that occurs all the time in healthcare, but the effectiveness of that training is an issue.
Yeah,
it is there, and the intention is for it to be effective. But the fact of the matter is, you just got a lot of individuals that are put on the front lines, really, I would say, immature in the skills needed to perform at the level we want, which is when our life's in danger.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Many of that get it on the job. In real time, and it doesn't have to be that way.
No, that's what you don't want.
And again, that's not to say anything about our first, responders.
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely the best they can with the tools they were given and the training that they can get. But really, when we enhance the front line, we're enhancing healthcare because being an executive at a hospital, many times certain paths and certain probabilities have already occurred when the ambulance runs up to the front door at the ER.
Right.
If certain things have not taken place, you just can't go back at that point in time. It is what it is.
Yeah, there's no way to rewind the clock.
And people don't necessarily, I think we've had a lot of focus on our first responders, but really have missed some of the needs that first responders have. Safety has always been something that, we've talked a lot about, but what also about those skills enhancements do they need as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're an underserved and overlooked population who are the ones who are saving everyone's life first.
That's right. Well, they're the ambulance.
Well, yeah,
right?
of course. It's a ride to the hospital.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they'll be here. They'll take care of it. Well, that take care of it, they don't really understand. I mean, it's gotten better. I was fascinated too, just from an ambulance and what they do as, what tools they have. But again, kind of getting all away from that. You can even give them good tools, but if you can't get them the right education and training on the tools they have, the right tool that was placed in the right compartment that lasts for the right amount of time doesn't do anybody any good.
No, and if the trainer is having a bad day or if they can't make it repeatable, right, then it degrades the training. And that's where, mannequins, there's just trouble with them. To moulage them, to set it up, to get it working right, sometimes to program these things is hours of work for a single scenario that all the students will watch. And now, okay, we saw the path. We saw exactly where the hole for the IV is because there's a hole in the plastic. I'm just going to go right there. I'm going to practice it. So our part of our mission is making it more challenging, but creating a better cognitive pathway. So now you're creating decision makers, not box checkers.
Right. Because the box is easy when
it's easy to check a
right
box
there, and this is the box I'm supposed to check. But if you can get them into more real world type scenarios to check that box, well, now it becomes training.
Yeah, and now they're not imagining it either, right? With the mannequin, and you can moulage the life out of something, right? Get the blood right, get all the different signs and symptoms. But at the end of the day, it's a lifeless piece of plastic, kind of lying dormant on the floor that will kind of buzz if it's having a seizure. And there's some really good high fidelity mannequins. I'm not, we're not coming for your mannequin because our product works in junction with it if we need it to. But there's just something to be said about, watching the rise and fall of a chest or watching someone stop breathing. And mental health is something that first responders don't talk about enough, I think. And one of the things that our product does, fortunately or unfortunately, is it allows for training on that end too, because now you're watching a decomposing patient expire versus the mannequin. Okay, well, you made a wrong decision. The monitor goes flat. You're getting a lifelike view of death before you see it on a person. Which nothing prepares you, but we endeavor to make it more
high
prepared.
fidelity mannequins. Because I was around them. We during my time there, the nursing leadership. We put together a nursing residence program, an intern training program, and just a phenomenal program that Methodist has that I was, fortunate to be ancillary to. So I was always curious. And so, I'd go in and see the trainings and be curious for me as a non-clinical provider. But you're right, looking at a mannequin that is signaling and getting me to react to certain conditions is very different than seeing an actual person where I now have to overcome my emotion and make the right clinical call versus just make the right clinical call. So anyway, it's a phenomenal thing that you're doing. I can't agree more with the fact that we need more training and the scalability of what y'all are doing as well,
Appreciate
the portability of those things. It's massive. Let's talk a lot about what you guys are doing with regard to funding. So you mentioned a little bit with sort of government grants. Share your experiences, the company's experience with getting into those grants, because those opportunities are out there to advance medicine, especially for technologies that can apply to the battlefield potentially, or training those to be better at their jobs at the battlefield. What was MedCognition's experience like, or is it like?
So it was and is. So a couple things. One, a little plug for Velocity Texas, because they've connected us to some of the right players in the industry. And Fonseca didn't ask me to say it. It's the truth, right? But we found that with connections to organizations like AFWorks based out of Capital Factory, or the fact that we have access to a firm like Capital Factory in Austin, on top of the connections with Sammy here in San Antonio, now we figured out, one, that opportunities existed for essentially free money from the government. Now there's strings attached to it naturally with development, but it was all about we put ourselves out there right, wrong, or indifferent, for every potential grant that we get our hands on that matches our mission. We lose more than we win, but we keep swinging the bat, right? It's all about the muscle memory for us. So we have done studies with the NIH. We have done grants with the Air Force. We have done 1 or 2 through UT already, utilizing the relationship that Professor Quarles has. So I can't speak well to it, honestly, because John does the 90% of that uplift, and then Hector and Kevin had done the clinical validations in the past. That developed the product initially.
Sure.
That helped get the research funded. I think that the total number from 2016 to 2019 was 2.2 million in grants from the federal government, all based on the clinical applications that were presented.
Sure.
So they saw the value in it. But for us, we have been fortunately bootstrapping since 2016. So no debt, no funding, no investors yet, though we're looking. Hint, hint, wink, wink. We're starting to have those conversations with folks now, but very early stages. When I joined, good, bad, or otherwise, we were essentially on the brink of insolvency in December 2020. It was close. And this was by no fault of the founders. They didn't paint an accurate picture. They just had inaccurate data, right? Which is common for a young startup.
Yeah.
So by the time we got that sorted out, we're looking at ourselves in January of 21 going, well, I better polish my resume up because in April we're dead. So we decided to do something simple but easy where we focused 100% of our energy on nothing but sales. We didn't stop development. They were working on bug fixes and updates, and myself and the 2 reps at the time, one of which is still with us, it was all day, every day, banging the phones, emails, looking for lists, going to trade shows, everything and anything you could think of, whether it worked or not, we just threw it all at the wall. And we found that hitting community colleges with paramedicine programs, and then rural EMS institutions were people who were early adopters, good believers in the product. And we went from 400,000 in 2020 to 1.3 million in 21.
Wow.
So a nice jump, but it was, I wouldn't call it a bull in a china shop approach, but we did nothing else but sales for 8 months. It was, I was on the phone daily with people, going back to getting rejected, feeling, bringing up emotions from my early 20s, like, why don't you like me here? And so that has fueled our growth this year in 22. It's actually fueling us well into 2023. Fortunately, we've been good with our capital and cash reserves. We've been lean with our staff. We've had to make some challenging decisions, obviously, like anybody else. But we're plugging along. There's no other way to say it.
Talk about the organization. So you've talked about the founders, and then you're now the CEO.
Sure.
How was it for you coming into a young organization as the outsider that wasn't there at the birth of the baby?
Yes.
Right, but now there's a new daddy. Sorry, I went with the analogy. You might get some jokes on that one.
I'll take it.
It is what it is, right? Talk about that a little bit, about coming into an organization, very early on, but not at the beginning.
Yeah, so it was challenging, to say the least. Even, going right back to interview stage, where you're going to hit a point where you're going to have some challenging conversations with folks who have put their blood, sweat, and tears into something, but they hit their upper limit with what they can do. So the conversations in the beginning were difficult. Were sometimes, it's right. The baby's a great analogy, because when it's your child, it's easy to get emotional over something.
Sure.
So, in comes the third party, and you start observing, and my whole role was find the holes, plug the holes, sell the product. That was my core mission to start. And, there was a number of holes that we had to plug. And then you point those things out to somebody who has thought of the idea, coded it from square one, done the initial sales, done the traveling, put money in themselves because, self-funded company. And then you're like, well, here's all the things that are wrong. All of a sudden, everyone's on the defensive.
That's right.
So there was one gentleman on the board who's still there, I'll leave nameless, who was just a great advocate to help bridge the emotional outrage, some of the things that happen normally. The biggest challenge that I faced was having to speak with authority to guys who had the authority themselves. They started the company, started the product, and then they hire you in a role to now, be second in command, but then they don't want to do the things that you ask. No fault of their own, it's just human emotion, human nature. So that took, part of our slow growth was just taking a couple months to figure out the relationship, the way these guys wanted to interact, the level and willingness to do the things that I thought needed to be done, versus the way it had been being done, which was leading us to failure.
Which I'm assuming board leadership is probably one of the most influential parts of your ability to do that, which, the conversation again, and being in the boardroom a lot as, the corporate counsel and that sort of thing, I see it a lot, which is, companies experience what you just said all the time on the path. And it comes when there's a new, the founders start to bring in professional management or venture capital gets involved.
Right.
And that's nothing bad against venture capital, but venture capital brings not only capital to expand, but they bring industry experience.
Absolutely.
And that industry experience comes typically in a board role, which starts to dictate strategy and policy, which starts to permeate through the organization.
Right,
so
absolutely.
All organizations, as they mature, must go through this. Rarely do they get to not go through this.
Right. Growing pains, it's good.
Or if they don't, they just didn't make it. It is usually the case.
Sure.
So it's very typical for that, but again, very atypical in a young company to have an outsider come in. What do you think was the driver? Or actually, let me back up. Sales. You took a company that was development, innovative, and had to move to sales. Talk a little bit about how you structurally and strategically shifted the organization to be more sales focused.
Yeah, so I wish it was like a really complicated, wonderful answer, but
I hope it's simple, because then it's just one of those of here you go.
Right. It's really, really basic. So the focus was always on what the product might do in the future, not what it does right now.
Oh, interesting.
So as observing the conversations, watching the demos online and in person, it was here's what's in the pipeline to develop.
Ooh,
and here's what it
sell, because you don't have it today.
Here's what it might do. So after just honestly a couple of weeks of watching that, the pivot was simple. Let's stop focusing on the development and start talking about only the things that our product does, only the things Persim does. So, amputations. There's 10,000 different applications baked into the baseline product. The real number is 1.5, 1.6 million. I've got a 2-page Word document from an engineer who did the math. Which looks like, it looks like Greek to me, to be honest with you.
The different kind of scenarios.
Exactly. All the cases you can build from the most simple to the most complicated is well over 7 figures.
Wow.
So, where it's 10,000 simulations in your pocket, right, is the marketing spiel we try.
That works.
It works. And it's, drag and drop. It's nice and easy. But getting back to it, so it was pivoting from, we're not going to talk about what it might do. We're going to talk about what it does. Here are the features you can utilize right now in this moment to get your students trained better, to get them more immersed, to get them making better decisions. And that simple pivot, one in mentality first, so we had to get everyone on board with that. So it's just a couple of Zoom meetings, get everyone, all right, you're not going to talk about future features, only what's working right now. And then the second piece was, and the developers were never involved on the front end, but it was just kind of siloing the two sides of the house for a couple of months so that we'll talk internally, but sales is going to lead the charge. And we're only going to have the sales team, not founders or other executives do that. Myself excluded. I was doing it, and that was the pivot. Just only talk about.
That's fascinating though, because just as an outsider looking in, the history you gave, it was an idea that was innovative, that had been developed. It was government grants. In those grants, you do talk prospective about if you give me this money, right? This is what we believe we can accomplish.
Yeah.
The government validates that and says, oh, okay, well, then we'll give you the money. So the company was really in that type of mindset, which was...
And it made sense.
We need to continue to push forward, because if we push forward, we're going to get the funding we need to get there, versus let's change our mindset and say, we have a product today.
Right.
Some of you will still continue to push forward, but the most of us, we need to monetize this thing.
Exactly. It was commercially
taking
viable.
Off that development mindset to a commercialization mindset, which again, most startups and most founders are in that development stage.
Well, that's the visionaries geared that way.
Yeah.
Like, here's how it's going to be better in the future. Don't worry about what it's doing. Think about what it might do. And again, the role is vital for any startup. But when you're trying to sell a product, it's here's what it's going to do for you today. If you were to take hands on it and we deliver the product for you.
Well, and the best founder visionaries that I've gotten to talk with, they speak as though they have a roadmap. They'll tell you what the end is. right? But they're also very good to be able to be like, well, we're going to be here, and then we're going to be here in 3 years and 4 years. So you can visualize, okay, it's here today. Because many times founders, I think also in my experience with pitches and those sort of things, they tell you their vision and they're like, give us money. And then you go, well, that's got to be really, really expensive. That's going to take a whole lot of time. Like, what are you going to do with the money today, and how do you get there? And so then their solution is a development mindset of a long period of time, and they miss the commercialization opportunity.
Yeah, so there was an opportunity early on where we thought, let's go for funding. Let's try to figure out how to keep the company afloat. And then it was just, with the board of directors, myself and the founder at the time, a hard decision. We're not going to go for funding. We're just going to sell.
Yeah.
And if we can stay commercially viable, if we can balance the numbers at the end of the year, we'll keep pushing this thing through. If we get to a point, August, September, maybe we'll roll this thing up and we'll call it a day. And
it puts you in such a stronger position to fundraise. If I'm generating cash and maybe even somewhat positive cash flow, my goodness, right? Which most tech companies don't think that way. They just think the MRR, ARR, multiple keep on rolling. But if you really do step back and maybe see what we see a little bit more of now that the economy is taking a shift of back is to more of a stronger cash flow, self-development from cash flow. How are we prioritizing for some really successful companies? Because that creates sustainability.
Absolutely.
Versus, my runway is this. If the funding turns off, we burn up in T-minus 4 months.
Right. And we still have that in the back of our head for where the runway is. Yeah, but
you've got a little bit of control from the fact that you're commercializing versus you're a little bit of commercialization and really heavy development.
Yeah, and the sales cycle for us varies, but we can predict it relatively well now. Q4 is very heavy for us. Even in those very lean early years before my time, Q4 is where all the money was made, even if it was $80,000.
And is that just because budgets are set so they're green light to go ahead and spend to the point?
Whether they're ending a calendar year or the next FY. Everything kind of opens up August,
then Merry
September.
Christmas, it's Q4.
Oh, it's going to be a great Q4. We had a bunch of LOIs over the summer that are now they're funding and we're configuring systems, which is great. But you mentioned, going in the black. So we had for what is us, we had a very nice profit year in 21. And now believe it or not, we're selling less actual systems and devices, but more software this year, which is the goal.
I was going to say, that's even better.
So we've been cash positive every month again in 22.
Yeah. That's great.
Which is great. It's exciting for us.
I'd sell my high margin business all day long if I could. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the industry. A lot of people now are talking, the word meta, since Facebook is now meta, which I guess I get. People say 2016, that's not too long ago, but VR, it really hasn't been around except for the last couple of years. My kids, they have the Meta Quest, which is a phenomenal
it's a great
piece
product.
of equipment. That's the version 1. I haven't seen the version 2. But that's really the commercialization from a consumer standpoint to finally hit the shelves with something PlayStation tried.
Right, low cost to entry.
Right. But now, because it's, kind of hit that tipping point where now the normal person can experience VR, it's now more mainstream, but it's only in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
What do you see as the future for VR and these technologies broad, and then we'll come back to medical?
Yeah, sure. So I think broadly speaking, I think things like virtual reality are going to shift towards game. They're already in gaming. That's their primary application. But I think it's going to stay there. I don't see VR as a path forward for clinical training. Frankly, because I think it gamifies it too much. And there's a time and a place for that, and the world is big enough for all sorts. But I see VR just focusing on gaming unless, someone else decides to try to catch up with what we're doing.
And for the rookie here, and I realize it, so I'm assuming VR is where I'm not seeing anything but what I think I'm on the roller coaster and it looks like I'm in the roller coaster going down, and not do I see my own reality with something overlaid on it.
Yeah, exactly. So inhibited vision, right?
Okay.
So you've got the lens and it's blocking your face. You could bump into a wall. We've had some fun at trade shows with other competitors.
I've seen some great TikToks. There's a new football game that came out. My kids were playing, and you can't run, but you're getting rushed to the quarterback. And there's some great TikToks out there of people trying to run from the sack.
Yeah, I may or may not have had some fun with some competitors, just like kind of whispering in people's ear as I have the VR headset on and getting the reaction. Like, you can't do that with ours. But yeah, so for me, the gamification piece of it, I don't see it lasting inside clinical or medical, just because you're still, you're utilizing joysticks, you're not using your hands, so it's a video game, and that's okay. And there are probably applications at some point in the future for things like robotic surgery where they're using tools, so it makes sense to use a tool to train, right? And that's not where we're headed. So that's where I sit with VR. With AR, and it's not just because I'm the CEO of the company. It's not just because I joined them. I really see AR as the future, right? So now we're out of body. There's a great product out of Case Western that does in the body. Pretty high cost, but it's damn good.
Wow.
So hollow human, hollow anatomy is the one, and that's something else. But with the augmented, right, and especially, right, because I'm biased, especially with our product, you've got now. People will spend millions on mannequins, and operations professionals will write that check all day, every day. We get them for a system with all the bells and whistles for $26,000 all in for the first year and $12,000 thereafter, and it's like pulling teeth because it's new, it's innovative, it's not in the purchase cycle, it's not in the budget, it's not in the curriculum, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this.
Are you an approved vendor? No, you're not. Well, we got about 6 pieces of paper we have to get filled out by 10 other people, and then there's the clinical approvals and all those sort of things. People don't realize healthcare has got so much red tape.
And it's funny. So we tried to kind of not circumvent it with a vendor. Like, if you sell me something for less than $20, I can get you a vendor number. I'm like, what do we have? I'm like, oh, we can replace a brow pad for you. So the guy for $18 bought a brow pad on an invoice. It took him 90 days to pay it because that was their terms. So the longest, waiting period. But now we have a vendor number. I can't say the state name yet because we haven't finalized everything. But it's these little, these are the nuances that are killing us right now, is just waiting to be approved vendors or working with third parties who are necessary vehicles in the state.
Sure.
But the time we spend negotiating the fees so that our product is still affordable and then we're still making margin on the other side of it is challenging for us.
Yeah, I mean, institutional agility that's an oxymoron.
Yeah, it is.
It just absolutely is, whether it's government, school, or hospitals. And I'm not saying state; it can be public or private.
Of course.
It is just, they are large organizations with lots of rules unique to every single one of them that really prevents agility of innovation, I think in those industries. It's interesting on the AR and then the virtual reality too. Mm-hmm. Because there is so much education in general that's going towards gamification, because you brought that up.
Yeah.
Do you see that moving into the healthcare training, or because I hope not. Because we just talked at the beginning here how the skills of those on the front lines and like nurses and doctors, it's not a game what they're playing. They're playing with someone's life. But do you see that in the industry, just out of curiosity, were people trying to gamify?
It's that's been a trend for a while, because now you want to get them involved, you want to get them active. So if there's a badge, a point, a certification, that for a gold star, for goodness sake, learners tend to want that reward, that satisfaction. But for us, and kind of getting back to a question from a few minutes ago, is putting something in the scenario with AR. So instead of gamifying it, now you're out in the field and there's 5 or 6 patients with all with different injuries. You've got to assess, all right, who's first? Where do I go first?
Yeah.
Right. How do I do this mass casualty incident? So it's teaching you not just to go for a reward, but no, I need to figure out, who am I seeing first? Is it this pregnant female, or is it this guy who's missing both of his legs? What do I do?
Okay, you actually can do those type of...
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the individual lens itself, which is a Microsoft restriction, supports up to 4 patients at once.
Okay. And
then the way we circumvent that is by multiple lenses on a single system. Microsoft says you can do 8. We have found by trial and error 5 is the magic number before there's degradation with a signal and things like that.
Wow. Oh, so they set that limitation based upon the quality.
Yeah, the tech can tie the HoloLens, which is out of our control. Yeah, no, not at all. So,
well, let me ask you about that, because for these type of technology, take a TV, right? Mm-hmm. The ability to send signals just didn't match the ability to have product that was at a price point that people really cared. Right now, just amazes me. You go into Costco and you get a 100-inch television for a couple $1,000. That's 4K, because finally the products got up to where the software was. How is that in the cycle right now? Is the software ahead? Is the Is the hardware, ahead? What's ahead, and where do you think we're going to find that magic spot?
Yeah, so the software is definitely ahead of the hardware right now.
Okay.
And I mean, Microsoft puts out a phenomenal product. The HoloLens, especially the version 2, it's got a lot of computing power. It's got great arrays to actually do the holographic projections. But we are constantly testing, other devices, other products that are specifically for AR.
Got it.
Because Microsoft may stop making the HoloLens at some point. You don't know with large corporation.
Right.
So we have to be agile enough and be ready for that. Or when Meta, releases, this mass to the market product, it's got to be ready for it, right? Both on the Android and iOS side.
And so is that something your software, y'all have to try to anticipate on the curve from a developer side to say, when will that be there? Because, in today's age, you've got to be cross-platformed,
We have no choice.
Yeah, unless you're, a video game company, and then you can try to designate on there and drive it. So, okay.
Right. And if you want to get, technical, we're coded, our base code is Unity. So we are a video game company.
Okay.
If you want to say, which we're not, obviously, right? Medical device, medical training, all of that. But
your underlying framework
is gaming, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
which makes sense, right? Because that's where the most of that development's going. And so if you can layer it onto those platforms.
Yeah, it works well.
What do you see as the future, kind of last couple of questions for you. What do you see as the future for MedCognition?
That's a loaded question.
It is loaded. That's why I said it was one of the last
Yeah,
ones
no,
there.
for sure. So I can tell you what is my vision and my goal, right? As someone put it nicely a few weeks ago, the founder of the Pivot.
Founder of the Pivot.
I was having dinner with a couple here in town at Il Forno, I think, nice pizza spot. And she's like, you introduce yourself and you're like, oh, I'm not the founder. You gotta cut that out already. You gotta think of a better way to do that. So, and she's like, I got it for you. You're founder of the Pivot. So anyway, but with
everybody that thinks of Friends and can think about the couch that was stuck in the stairwell.
Right, Pivot.
So you're gonna get some memes out of this.
Oh, it's gonna be good. Listen, Matthew, I'll take it. But anyway, getting to the core of the question, I see us as the standard in frontline medical training. Right, we have an immersive product, we have a portable product, we have one that doesn't rely on internet speed or connectivity, although we have features that at some point will, but again, what does it do today, not what will it do in the future?
Right.
It doesn't need the internet. We have a closed loop network that it connects to. The whole thing weighs 32 pounds all in. You can check it on it goes everywhere. It goes where you go, right? So our EMS customers, their favorite phrase is you can put a patient between the tub and the toilet because that's where they find it most of the time. So this is a very dynamic product, and we are very committed to being the standard, not mannequins. Again, we're not coming for your mannequins. The product works on its own, so it's per sim. I keep saying the product, it's per sim. You can overlay it on any mannequin, right down to like a kinked up fire hose with a t-shirt on. It works. Wow. I know because I've done it myself. Little trouble finding the anatomical landmarkers on that one, but we made it work with some clever Sharpie on a white t-shirt. That was at John Marshall High School a few months ago here in town. Good instructors there. So that's where we want to go with it. I see us as a way to create decision makers, not box checkers. And I firmly believe I'm banking a lot of things on that in my business life and in my personal life as well to make this organization work. And we've got a great team. We've got a good supportive network here between Velocity and TRTF and the folks at the Capital Factory and UT. The support in San Antonio is endless. So much so that I split my time between my family in Jersey and here to the point where I should probably just find a physical address down here, right, and start getting mail in San Antonio. So.
Well, Russell, thanks so much for coming on. You guys are a great asset for the community. Look forward to hearing all the amazing things that you're going to continue to do and the success from that. So thanks again for coming by.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Matthew.
And for those of y'all that are listening, in the description there, we'll put the links to MedCognition so that way you can give them a peek if you like. The sales team is ready and on standby at any point in time that you're ready to make an order.
They better be.
If you're listening to us online, click subscribe. That way you get all of our episodes. If you're watching us on YouTube version, leave us a comment in the comments section. Let us know we're providing value. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.